"Sir, you can't beg here. This is private property." "You'll have to leave," said the mall security guard, his uniform tight across a protruding belly. The elderly man, Hank Jenkins, 72 years old, was trying to shield himself from the cold breeze near the food court entrance, clutching his thin coat tighter around his frail frame. "Son, I'm only here for a little while." "I'm not bothering anyone," Hank said quietly. The guard glanced up for a moment, then with irritation replied, "Yeah, that's what everyone says." He grabbed Hank's arm roughly and shoved him outside. "Move along, or I'll have you arrested for trespassing." 13 minutes later, Hank sat shivering on a bench outside the mall as the cheerful holiday music inside suddenly cut off. From every speaker, a voice rang out, calm but authoritative, "Attention shoppers and mall staff. This is General Marcus Thorne. We have an emergency situation." Hank knew cold. He'd spent time in harsher places, bitter winds cutting through no shelter, the kind of cold that gnaws at your bones. But the city cold was different. It carried loneliness, isolation, and shame. The kind of chill that seeps deeper when surrounded by warmth and bustle you can't reach. Hank was homeless. He hid that fact from the world as best he could. His small army pension wasn't nearly enough to cover the skyrocketing rent. His health, ruined by years of military service and life on the streets, made work impossible. His belongings fit in a worn backpack, an old blanket, a water bottle, a tattered Bible, and a dog tag, the faint trace of a life once full of purpose and camaraderie. The Northwood Mall was his refuge for a few hours every day, a place to escape the cold, a place to disappear quietly. As long as he stayed silent and out of sight, nobody bothered him. He never asked for money or made a fuss. He just tried to live in the small warmth he could find, even if it was only the neon lights of shops and the murmurs of strangers. Today's cold was biting, the kind of early winter chill that cuts through the skin and rattles your teeth, a pre-Christmas wind that reminded him painfully of what he had lost. Hank searched for a hidden corner near the food court to sit and warm up, hoping maybe a janitor would leave behind a forgotten cup of coffee. He wasn't bothering anyone. He just wanted to survive the cold. But the mall's security guard, Officer Miller, spotted him immediately. Miller was young, maybe not even 20, but took his job very seriously. He called himself the lead security supervisor, proud of keeping the mall's image spotless, making sure no unwanted types tarnished the place. To Miller, Hank was nothing but trouble, shabby clothes, a heavy backpack, tired eyes. Miller approached, hand resting on his utility belt, voice raised just enough to intimidate. "Look, you can't stay here. There's no shelter in the mall. Pack up and move on." Hank replied in a low voice, "I'm just here for a little while. The cold outside is too much. I'll be gone soon." "Not good enough," Miller snapped. "This is private property, and you're disturbing others." "I'm not disturbing anyone," Hank said softly, shame and pain clear in his eyes. Miller stepped closer, voice dropping threateningly, "If you don't leave now, I'll call the cops and have you arrested. Got it?" Then he shoved Hank's backpack with his boot. Hank raised his hands instinctively to protect his few possessions. That moment, the pain, the humiliation, was worse than the cold. Hank struggled to stand, dizzy. Miller mistook it for defiance, grabbed his arm hard, and pushed him out. The backpack fell, spilling water, Bible, and dog tag across the floor. Miller picked up the dog tag, sneered, and threw it aside. "Keep your garbage together and get out of here." Hank gathered his things slowly, shoulders bowed under the weight of shame and chill. Outside, he sat down on a cold bench. Inside him was a deep ache, not just from the freezing air, but from losing his dignity. He thought of old friends in his army days, then pulled out an old leather address book from his pocket. There was one number he never dialed except in desperation, General Marcus Thorne's private line, his old commander. With trembling fingers, Hank dialed the number. The phone was answered instantly, a deep voice, firm but tired, "Thorne here." "Sir, Sergeant Henry Jenkins, 101st 2nd Brigade," Hank said, his voice weak but steady. The general recognized him immediately. "Hank Jenkins? It's been years. Where are you now? Hank explained everything, the cold, the guards' cruelty, the humiliation outside the mall. The general's voice hardened. Northwood Mall? You're there? Wait for me. I'm on my way. For the first time in a long while, a small spark of hope flickered inside Hank. And soon, amidst the quiet tension of the mall, a new sense of strength and possibility began to rise. The overhead lights flickered slightly as the mall's usual buzz was replaced by a tense silence. Shoppers glanced nervously at one another, whispers spreading like wildfire. Inside the food court, Hank remained seated on the cold bench, clutching his thin coat around him. He had no idea how long it would take for General Thorne to arrive, but just knowing help was coming steadied his shaking hands. Outside, a sleek black SUV pulled up quietly to the mall entrance. The door opened and a tall, imposing man stepped out, General Marcus Thorne. His military uniform was crisp, but his face showed the weight of years spent fighting battles not just on the field, but in the halls of power. Thorne walked briskly inside, eyes sharp, scanning the crowd. The security officers who spotted him stiffened immediately, whispering among themselves. He was not just a visitor, he was the man who once commanded some of the toughest soldiers in the region. Spotting Hank near the food court, Thorne's expression softened. He approached slowly, nodding at a couple of wary mall employees. Hank Jenkins, the general said, his voice steady but kind. I got your message. Hank looked up, eyes brightening despite the cold and pain. Sir, thank you for coming. Thorne lowered his voice. I'm here to make sure you're safe. No one should treat a veteran like this. Before Hank could say more, Officer Miller appeared again, his face red with embarrassment and anger. General, I was just enforcing the rules. We can't have people begging here. Thorne's gaze was icy. Is that so? Is that what you call it? Miller hesitated, realizing the gravity of the man standing before him. Thorne turned to the crowd that had gathered. Everyone here should know, this man served his country. And he deserves respect and dignity, not being thrown out in the cold. A few shoppers nodded quietly, shame coloring their faces. Thorne then pulled out his phone, speaking firmly into it. Dispatch, send additional support to the Northwood Mall immediately. We're going to help the homeless veterans in this area. Starting now. The mall manager, who had been watching anxiously, finally stepped forward. General Thorne, how can we assist? Thorne's eyes locked on the manager. Create a temporary shelter space inside the mall. Coordinate with local charities. We're not letting this happen again. Hank felt tears prick his eyes, not from cold, but from the sudden rush of hope. The mall that had rejected him today was about to become a beacon of hope for others like him. As the first few volunteers arrived, offering blankets and warm food. The general looked back at Hank and said, You're not alone anymore, Sergeant. We'll fix this. And with that, the winter chill outside seemed a little less biting. The temporary shelter inside the mall quickly took shape. Tables were set up near the food court, stacked with blankets, warm meals, and hot drinks. Volunteers moved with purpose, their faces full of compassion and determination. Hank sat down at one of the tables, sipping the steaming coffee a young woman had handed him. For the first time in days, he felt a flicker of warmth, not just from the cup, but from the kindness around him. General Thorne walked among the crowd, speaking quietly to the volunteers and mall staff. His commanding presence gave everyone a sense of reassurance, that this was more than a temporary fix. This was the start of something real. As night fell, the mall's harsh fluorescent lights were softened by strings of warm fairy lights, creating a calm and hopeful atmosphere. People who had been pushed to the edges of society found a place to rest, to talk, to be seen. Hank found himself sharing stories with another veteran, a woman named Maria, who had also struggled after returning home. They spoke of lost battles and small victories, of a world that often seemed to forget those who fought for it. You're not alone, Maria said softly. We have to stick together. Outside, the winter wind howled, but inside, the mall was alive with quiet determination and the first sparks of community. Later, General Thorne returned to Hank's side. I'm arranging for you and the others to get access to medical care and housing assistance, he said. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. Hank nodded, feeling a strength he hadn't known he still had. Maybe tomorrow would be different. The next morning, the mall buzzed with a newfound energy. Word had spread quickly. What started as an emergency shelter was turning into a genuine support center. Doctors, counselors, and social workers arrived, ready to help those who had long been ignored. Hank found himself sitting with a counselor named Elena, who listened patiently as he spoke about the struggles that followed him home from the battlefield. She didn't rush him or try to fix things with empty promises. Instead, she offered understanding and a plan. Step by step, she said. We'll work on your housing first. Then the rest will follow. For the first time in a long while, Hank allowed himself to hope. Over the coming days, the mall transformed further. The food court became a community kitchen, where volunteers prepared hot meals from donated ingredients. A small library corner was set up, filled with books and magazines, providing a quiet space for those who needed it. Kids from the neighborhood began visiting, curious and excited. Their laughter brought lightness and reminded everyone of life beyond survival. Hank volunteered to help with the distribution of supplies. Though his body ached, his spirit felt lighter. He realized that healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken, it was about rebuilding connections, finding purpose, and reclaiming dignity. One afternoon, as snowflakes drifted outside, Hank stood by a window and watched the crowd. Faces both worn and hopeful surrounded him, strangers bound together by resilience. General Thorne approached him again, this time with a soft smile. You're a vital part of this, Hank. Together, we'll make sure no one is forgotten. Hank nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle into his bones. This was no longer just a shelter. It was a home. And he was finally ready to rebuild. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope after all. Weeks passed, and the shelter within the mall grew into a thriving community hub. The initial chaos was replaced by routine and order. Volunteers organized workshops, job training, health checkups, and counseling sessions. People who once felt invisible now found purpose and connection. Hank's mornings started with helping at the kitchen, preparing meals alongside others who shared similar stories of hardship. He'd listen to their tales, their hopes, and their fears. Sometimes, he shared a bit of his own, how the war had stolen his home, but not his will to keep fighting. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, Hank sat near the food court's fireplace. Children gathered around, eyes wide with curiosity, listening to stories of distant lands and brave heroes. Hank found himself smiling more, laughter returning to a place long forgotten. General Thorne continued to visit, bringing supplies and offering encouragement. We're building something important here, she said. Not just a shelter, but a future. Hank nodded. The scars on his body reminded him of the past, but here, among new friends and fresh hope, he felt something he hadn't in years, belonging. One day, a letter arrived for Hank. It was from an old friend, a fellow soldier, reaching out with words of solidarity and an invitation to join a veterans support group. Hank read the letter twice before folding it carefully. He looked around the mall, now bustling with life and laughter, and for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that healing was possible. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but surrounded by community and compassion, Hank was ready to face it. Because sometimes, home is not a place, it's the people who help you find your way back.